All right. So be careful what you say. Now it's all being recorded.
Oh yeah. Don't want to give away too much.
I'm gonna be like all official about this, so you should say who you are.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hello. My name is Chris Carey. I was the guitar player for Dead Conspiracy, founding member. I'm also the bass player for Poison Idea.
Sweet. You guys are going on tour this summer, right?
Yeah, we're going back to Europe.
Sweet. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm happy about it.
I bet. So I was last night going through some of the Dead Conspiracy stuff, and I found a show that I believe was from '87 in Seattle with Final Conflict. Is that right?
Might have been Forced Entry.
The Forced Entry. That's who I'm talking about. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I'm a great journalist.
No, that's fine.
And what I found really interesting is like there definitely seem to be like different elements of like thrash and like death metal and what would become black metal.
Sure.
And so were you guys really aware of what was happening overseas at the time?
Well, a band like Forced Entry was really basically, I'd say their main thing was Metallica.
Right.
I don't know if they had heard anything like Sodom, or if they had, you couldn't tell by their music.
Right.
You know, the bands that we were into that inspired us to play that style were definitely the big German three,
Right.
Sodom, Destruction, and Creator.
Right.
All the ones that you hear, all those other guys and bands talking about, Celtic Frost was really a big deal for us. Bathory, there weren't that many bands around.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you become aware of those bands? Because from I was alive, but I wasn't there. It doesn't seem like they really were big over here at the time, or were they?
Well, they were. Let's take a band like Sodom. You could find their records in places like Second Avenue,
Right.
or For What It's Worth records, where I swear their copy of In the Sign of Evil sat there for years and years and years, because we would usually buy at Second Avenue.
Right.
For What It's Worth was out on the west side where we grew up, off Canyon Road,
Right.
in Beaverton. But I grew up in Cedar Mill, which had a great record store called Dinosaur Records.
Nice.
Run by these two hippie guys. They tried to turn me on to punk, and I just, I still was pretty wary of any band with short hair because of the whole new wave thing
Right.
on MTV. So that's a whole different story. But that's how we got into those bands. It's just, look at the record cover. Ooh, these guys look evil. All right, these guys there's got to be something going on there,
Right. Before you got, because you were pretty young at the time, right? You were like...
Yeah, it was a weird time for that because when I was, 10 or 11, I heard AC/DC for the first time.
Right.
And so you find, that leads to Judas Priest. I was able to see them when I was on their Screaming for Vengeance tour when I was really young. Iron Maiden, all the big bands are still big now. Motley Crue was a big one.
Right.
And then, all of a sudden Metallica comes around, and you had these, you had magazines that the independent labels would put ads in, where you were kind of like, I don't know, are these guys any good? You just had to take your chances.
Right.
And so, and then of course hardcore punk was big here in Portland with bands like Poison Idea,
Right.
Final Warning, Lockjaw. We had the Wipers. We had everything here. So, what was cool changed so quickly.
Right.
Like by the time I got into punk, I got out. all but burned all my AC/DC albums.
Right.
And so that's how it was. It almost changed a little too fast because I think it kind of affected me identity wise. I was like, okay, I'm a punk. No, I love metal. Oh wait, now there's all this. Now there's all this evil metal. I love this shit.
Right.
You know, it's like, so. And there still wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of crossover yet.
Right.
So that all changed fast enough too. So
where was like Dead Conspiracy coming from back in the day?
Well, we started. Me and Frankie Domain and Mike Teal had a band called Wretched Death, and we were just terrible. And we basically improvised.
Right.
And then me and Frankie met. We had a bass player named Moonchild, whose real name is Lisa Mann. She's like a blues artist now. You can find her. She played bass and we were a punk band.
Right.
86 is when we came up with that name, Dead Conspiracy. And there were problems. We were, I was kind of a punk poser, like, I don't know, I'll admit it, and the Nazi skinheads would beat us up at shows. And so we're like, you know what? This isn't very fun. And we just kind of grew our hair out and started playing death metal.
Okay.
That's where you get those first 5 songs off that 87 demo. That's how, and through the punk scene, we met Eric Dorset and Eric DeTablin and Jason Nikes. So that's how, and we all contributed. We all wrote those songs together. And so that's basically how we got our place in metal history.
Right. What were there any particular bands that you guys were trying to emulate at the time, or were you trying to do your own thing?
Well, we were really primitive in our abilities.
Right.
So yeah, we would have loved to be as good as like Slayer or Destruction,
Right.
Technical wise, but we just weren't that good on our instruments.
Right.
So that's where that sound comes from. That's where that is just trying our best,
Right.
to sound dark and to sound like the people that we were listening to at the time.
Right.
It just came out a lot different.
One of the things that I don't know how to articulate this. It's hard for me, like I understand from my perspective why I'm interested in that music as an adult, but I've never had the experience of being a 14-year-old boy. So like,
Oh, yeah.
What was the appeal of like the whole like, ooh, it's so evil, like
Just rebellion.
right?
Rebellion, angst, anger,
Right.
anxiety, not really wanting to, because you gotta understand in the 80s everything was all neon and pink and
Right.
green and Reagan and Ronald Reagan and definitely anti-religious, just
Right.
it was and the hippies, we didn't, they were also smug, but a lot of them in hindsight were actually really cool,
Right.
but just wanting more, couldn't get enough,
Right.
especially, just, we needed heavier and louder and faster, and,
Right.
that's really just, it's the same today,
Right.
It just keeps going.
It does. Was your family religious? Did you grow up in a religious household?
Oh yeah, I was raised a Catholic. I was adopted through a Catholic agency in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but my parents are from here.
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't too bad.
Right.
I don't blame them for how I ended up or anything.
Right.
I didn't really like. I definitely hated going to church.
Right.
I hated. I didn't like the social aspect, like the gossipy people.
Right.
The way they would look at you. Because like they had me, they had my brother, and then we had my sister is Thai.
Mm-hmm.
So people were nice to our faces, but we got a lot of just in society in general. I think that's why a lot of people get into counterculture because they don't want to be a part of. What's the point?
Right.
Just,
It seems to me, I feel like a lot of the people I know that are really into like metal in general, and particularly like the darker metal, do tend to come from pretty religious households, like you did, and
Yeah.
what was your family's outlook on like what you were doing? Like, did you have to like hide your records or like?
well, I used to leave the house with my upside down cross necklaces hidden.
Right.
Then I'd get down the street, take them out, but no, they were supportive of any musical endeavors. When we started the band, we used to practice in my room at the house. Then we moved to Lisa's eventually, but yeah, they never, when we, this kind of goes into how we got our sound. I mean, they never bought me a Marshall stack.
Right.
They never bought me like anything. I had a PV Bandit, which is actually a really wicked sounding amp.
Right.
But yeah, no, they were supportive. They thought if I wanted to play music that was a good thing. So
were they aware of like what you guys were playing though?
yeah, when we started as a punk band, they just didn't know what to make of it. Mm-hmm. It was pretty much all over the place. When they went to our first show here in Portland, in '87, after the demo came out, we set up a show with Sadis from the Bay Area and Savior, who were also. They were the only other death metal band in town. Mm-hmm. I think they had a year on us, and I'm still friends with those guys, especially Jeff Walter. We play in Poison Idea together. But yeah, so no, they checked out a few shows over the years.
Yeah. I guess how do I? Kind of for my paper, I don't really know at this point, like kind of where I'm going with it because it's, kind of foreign to me because I wasn't around in that time period, obviously.
Oh, that's fine.
And so one of the things that I think about that was happening in the United States at the time that I do remember somewhat, I mean, even as a kid, was the whole satanic panic thing that was happening where...
Oh, yeah.
How did that influence or not influence anything you were doing?
That was really... You could tell that the people... Everyone from the people... like the Tipper Gores or the news, broadcasters did not know anything about heavy metal.
Right.
I mean, they were calling Judas Priest satanic. They were calling Ozzy satanic. It's like those guys were innovators of that kind of music, and that's what they did. Their agenda was to stay big.
Right.
And they came. Though now bands like that came from a time where a lot of money was put into, a lot of money, a lot of time was given to those bands.
Right.
And so they had, to keep that momentum going, they had to be outrageous.
Right.
At least, It's like, whoa, look at, it's like, these guys are, I love them. I love them.
Right.
I mean, I loved those bands when I was
Right.
young. They just, they knew it spoke to young people in a positive way. I think if you look at any of those earlier bands,
Right.
lyrics, Sabbath lyrics, Priest lyrics, they're always like about trying to better yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And of course there's some Dungeons and Dragons, but who doesn't, that stuff is great.
Right. Do you think I'm so bad at this.
But the whole Satanic Panic, they have to sell newspapers. They need viewers. These major networks need viewers. It's just feeding into something
Right.
that's made up, really.
From your perspective, when this was all going on, like, did you guys find it just funny, or did it egg you on to do crazier shit?
I think it had I think I agree with that. I think it was like these guys, like Ozzy, Priest,
Right.
they're not satanic. No, Slayer,
Right.
they're satanic.
Right.
Like, wow, this is like, fuck, Merciful King Diamond.
Right.
I mean, I would play that record low just because it would scare me. Don't break the oath.
Yeah.
Let alone. But yeah, so it was it was cool. It was really cool to just have it all evolve right before your eyes, almost.
Right.
That, I guess, if I had anything good to say about those times, would be that.
Right.
But on the other hand, it did make it like, man, I don't have enough money for all this,
Right.
change. It's so much change.
Right. So you told me that like you guys did have, or you had some correspondence with Euronymous. When did you first, find out about Mayhem?
I think I read about them. There was a lot of underground zines. And this is where the whole tape trading thing, after the, outbreak of bands like Slayer and Possessed, and bands like DRI, and there was a lot more correspondence. There's a lot more bands that probably weren't going to be signed or weren't even by the little labels. A lot of do-it-yourself. So you had a lot of people mailing each other their tapes.
Right.
Tapes, and that's what we did.
Right.
I'm not sure. Frankie did most of the corresponding, but I was always over at his house.
Right.
So I would, I would write something to whoever, or sometimes I would help with that,
Right.
help mail stuff. But it was his mom's place that was the dead conspiracy PO box.
Right.
And and we'd write to people all over the world.
Right.
Like bands down in South America, bands here in Canada, like Soothsayer. There's a few that really stick out because we had the most contact with. I'd say Soothsayer from Canada, Evil Dead from LA, Morbid Angel, and then random places that you'd be like, oh, those crazy Europeans.
Right.
Like it costs a lot to send them stuff, and then we started getting mail from Scandinavian countries with guys in corpse paint, and they'd be in these really nice like little neighborhoods, like these nice little houses around, and they'd be all and we thought it was like, whoa, these guys are. I personally thought these guys are onto something doing that. And then, here's how I know that I can't remember much. It's all kind of blurry.
Right.
But I do remember when I saw that Lords of Chaos book years later, about 6-7 years later. There's that picture of Necro Butcher playing the piano with a Garfield sticker. I go, we had that. You know what I mean? Like, we had that sent to us. And then it all kind of came back like, oh yeah, Mayhem, Emperor, and bands like that. So I wouldn't say that we had like any real. I do remember some of the letters too, like stay true or die. It was like.
Was that different than like American bands? Like the attitudes of those of the
Oh yeah, you could tell that they were really, really, really serious,
right?
And actually not very nice,
right?
Like almost threatening. We are the fucking, we are true. And, just like, we like your band, but you better not fucking, put, I was just like, geez, all right. I mean, so that's, we might have sent some tapes.
Right.
I can't say either way, but I know that a lot of those guys had our tape.
Right.
If they sold them in the shop, I don't know.
Right.
I can't remember.
When you're getting these pictures of like these crazy Scandinavian dudes and corpse paint, like had you ever seen anything like that at that point?
Well,
I mean, King
Diamond. Yeah. No, they definitely had an edge on it.
What did you guys think of that? Were you like, what the fuck?
Well, we were still pretty stupid,
right?
Just basically punk rockers still,
right?
And we'd be like, "Well, that is." I thought it was cool. I don't know if we, definitely didn't expect them to be that serious.
Right.
So yeah, that was, like, especially with like, say, Morbid Angel, they sent us their Thy Kingdom Come tape. And we were like, fuck, we might as well just give up.
Right.
Because it was so good.
Right.
And so well played. And it sounded raw, and they were just, obviously, they went on to make some great records. Mayhem and stuff. I was just, and I find myself today being more fascinated by the image and the stories.
Right.
So I, with all this hype again, I had to really go back and dig up my Dark Throne and some other things and really listen and go, man, some of the music is really, really fucking good.
Right.
Like, I mean, yeah, I have a definite love for that music.
Yeah. Were you guys, so when things started going a little sideways over there, were you guys aware of it? Like, was that talked about in the magazines that you guys read?
Yeah, I think I remember there was a lot of talk about when Dead killed himself. And that was like, man, he, at the time I didn't blame him. I was not a very happy person when I was that age either.
Right.
But I don't, I mean, he had some stuff going on with him. I think that, I think we found just anybody with their ear to the street, heard about the church burnings, and then there was the big Kerrang article, which that was weird because it had like Euronymous talking, and then like I think a week later he was dead.
Right.
I remember reading. I was working at Tower Records and just flipping through it, like, wow, they really, these guys were fucking serious,
right.
Like, I was blown away.
Right.
I was like, yeah, I could. I in a way, I wasn't. I wouldn't say I was jealous. I was like, well, good for man, better them than me, I guess.
Right. Do you? I The thing that I'm really trying to understand is, when you contrast like Scandinavian culture versus American culture at the time, especially like, Scandinavia seems pretty idyllic, and over here, you had fucking, like you said, Reagan, and the economy was starting to tank, and it was just a nightmare here. I think of like Rodney King was about that same time, just things was popping off. And so it seems to me like that the circumstances that happened like around like mayhem would have been more likely to happen here as opposed to.
Sure.
And so it's interesting to me that like, how did these rich white boys like go nuts? Like,
well, I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
I don't think you could really get away with like if I was back then, if I was walked, which I did now and then, we had clubs back in those days in North Portland and stuff like the Pit and St. John's. They were all short lived, but you weren't going to go around wearing like iron crosses and stuff in a Crip neighborhood or a Blood neighborhood. You know what I mean? You weren't gonna, that stuff wasn't gonna fly. I mean, there was still, especially in Portland, there was still a pretty segregated place in the 80s. I mean, what I think guys like Euronymous and Fenriz especially had was time to think. I think they probably understood art a lot more than your average American metalhead.
Right.
And especially with Dark Throne, I think they were able to take influence from Euronymous and really do something new and something that was what I think there's like elements out there, like when you write songs. Keith Richards used to say, I just kind of, reach out.
Right.
I think that what they were doing was what a lot of us were thinking, but did not know how to present it in that way. Right. And so that's why I give, like if people ask me like what my favorites are, I always go back to the A Blaze in the Northern Sky by Dark Throne, because that just has it all.
Right.
I think they were even listening to the Stooges. There's like a few riffs on there that sound like they could be on Raw Power.
Right.
Which is fucking crazy. I was, but most of it is all,
right. It's interesting.
Fast and
hearing some of those people's input, like the Once Upon a Time in Norway documentary, Mannheim mentions like Diamanda Galas as being one of their influences, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, she was I saw her live around the time that all that stuff was happening up in Seattle.
Huh.
I can see where, I think she was a big influence on black metal.
That's a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Coming out of like the goth scene where I'm more like
like her album Saint of the Pit or Plague Mass, if you listen to those, it's like a blueprint for that imagery and for that some of the sounds. At least, her thing is she is such a trip.
Right.
She has a jazz background.
Right.
And so, but yeah, no. Yeah, she definitely had a huge thing for that.
That's so weird to me. As far as like the white nationalism element, especially happening again, that's a kind of hard for me to understand. Like, they live in a white country. Why do they need to be white power? There's nothing to fight against. Wow. Like, was that when you were a kid? Like, did you guys find that like edgy and interesting, or like, can you was that a thing here?
Well, when Dead Conspiracy was, we'd been around for a couple of years and we were getting kind of big, and so we'd be playing the Starry Night, which is now the Roseland,
right?
And because there were still not very many bands around.
Right.
So we were it. Like if you wanted, us and Savior were it, and a couple others like Chemical Annihilation, and then Demise popped up. But anyways, after a while, we had like a good tenth of the crowd Sieg Heiling and Beating Up, kids, and it wasn't cool.
Right.
I mean, so I can't really. And then when you look at Europe and the black metal over there, I think there was still kind of a hangover of of World War II humor. That's where a lot of the guys like Lemmy or Ron Ashton wearing, SS garb, because their towns, my grandpa was in World War II. Mm-hmm. Ron Ashton's dad was in World War II. Mm-hmm. And those British guys are just kooky. They thought, their towns got bombed, and they had the weird sense of humor about wearing Nazi shit.
Right.
And I think it was, and I think they were just trying to be as extreme as possible. But it's sad where it's gotten today, where you look at some of the French bands now, and they're not even really black metal. They're just like, they just come across as like gangs of, thugs, and that's what they are. That's what they want. I think I just think racism in general is a mental disease.
Right.
So I can't really. I'm not scared of them. I might have went to go see Horna. Right. I don't know. I don't. It's really, really complicated.
Yeah.
It's not so cut and dry, but I just assume that's why I play punk. Right. That's why I just went back to punk.
Right.
Because I just, I love black metal. Maybe one day I will. I don't know. Because it just seems like if you aren't corpse painted out and you're not as fucking just, fucked up thinking as possible.
Right.
I don't want to hear it.
Right.
Because there's all those other genres, like black shoegaze and hipster black metal and stuff like that. I don't want that.
Right.
I want the real deal.
Right.
I want my mayhem. I want. Who else is out? There's.
No, I feel like I was having that conversation with a friend of mine who's pretty social justice-y, and she's like, give me some black metal that doesn't have any shitty associations, and I'm like, how many degrees of separation is your line? Because it's kind of I can't do that. But
yeah, it's hard.
Right.
I guess there's anarchist black metal where they, are all satanic and crazy, and
right.
I haven't really dug that deep for any of them. Because I listen to a lot of different shit now.
Yeah.
So a lot of jazz.
A
lot of
all kinds of shit.
A lot of Judas Priest.
Right.
I'm just excited that Judas Priest is still good. Still, I'm going to go see him again this year.
Me too.
Yeah. So.
He's not because he has a show.
Yeah, I saw that.
That was a stupid thing to do.
But yeah, no, I'm trying to think. Do you have anything that you can think of bad?
Not really off the top of my head. I mean,
well, I could tell you about the Necro sound and how we've gotten some credit for that 87 demo because of that sound. But it was really all due to the fact that we didn't have like the greatest equipment, and we didn't. I guess I kind of did already cover that, but it wasn't really intentional. We wanted to sound like Possessed, or I had like a crappy crate amp with a DOD distortion pedal and a Japanese BC Rich,
Nice.
and But that's how that came about. On an 8-track, you know,
Right.
we recorded it at a place over in Southeast called Chicken Coop Studios with a guy named Todd Thornton, and it was a lot of fun. It's just, you know, it's just in his basement. He lived there with his wife, smoked a bunch of pot, played, you know, and all of a sudden, whoa, we have it, you know, we have this tape now.
Right.
And that was a lot. That was really fun. But as far as the, you know, because basically for me it just goes back to the music,
Right.
and that's how that came about. Really,
Right.
that's a lot of that sound, necro sound, or you know what else, corpse sound, or whatever. But yeah, that's, you know, I think it's great music still. I really do. So that's what's important to me.
Right.
You know.
I guess I have one more question just to kind of like clarify. So when you guys were doing your thing, like, were you taking it seriously, or was it just like fun? Like, this is, or were you like, oh, we're really evil? Like,
No, we were serious about it being dark and evil.
right.
And then people started going to the used record stores and getting influenced by other kind of music. So we kind of, you know, we ended up sounding like Metallica, you know, which wasn't really my idea.
Right.
But, you know, that's just how it was. You know, it was a long time ago, and it was a learning experience.
Right.
And, yeah, it's cool to talk about it, you know. And, you know, I don't tell people a lot about the black metal stuff.
Right.
Just because, well, for one, they probably wouldn't believe me, and two, I'm not looking to impress anyone.
Right.
I just, it's a memory of mine that, you know, is,
Right.
you know, pretty weird.
So the Australian dude with the PhD in metal, which is so weird to me still, like, because I was talking to him from his perspective in Australia, and like, you know, again posing that question, like, why there and not here? Because that's, you know, you would think, and he actually brought up a really interesting perspective that like it would never have occurred to me, and you know, he was talking about those kids like being super into like their Norse heritage and like, ugh, fuck the church, they're the invading force, blah blah blah. And he was wondering, he posed the question if there were any, you know, parallels between that mentality and the Native American community here. And I don't know much about the metal Native American community, although I guess he sent me a video, it exists, but I was looking through the lens of like Wounded Knee in the 70s and Leonard Peltier and even Standing Rock more recently. Like, I could see how you could draw parallels, but it doesn't seem like it would be for the same reasons at all. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, the early Christians, you know, they, over in Europe, I think it was different. I think they were trying to modernize their society and using Christianity as a mask for a reason to do so.
Right.
And I think over here they used that same mask.
Right.
You know, like, oh, you're all savages if you're not Christian. But I think there was a lot, you know, more behind it. Like,
Right.
we want the gold.
Right.
We want, you know, land. We want to make you people slaves,
right,
or just kill you. You know, so that's, as far as like being bitter towards Christianity, I don't think it's done a lot of good. I think Christians in America are a lot more docile now,
right,
and realizing, geez, our answer is really fucked up. You know, so that, you know, so I which, burning out a church now, especially in America, you're just going to do a lot of time.
Right.
I do think that they could use those churches for other things, like maybe housing the homeless,
Right.
or something productive.
Right.
Especially as organized religion loses members
Right.
more every year.
Right.
So I don't know. That's some heady stuff.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting to have this Australian dude be like, I posed this question to you, and I'm like, I had never thought of it that way. Like,
oh, but yeah, if you look at destruction of sacred sites, it's
Right.
it's exactly the same.
right, exactly. Yeah, no, it was really interesting, but I think that at least in more contemporary culture, like, there's more of a sympathetic view toward like the native population than there would be a bunch of like satanic
Yeah.
Norwegian kids. Like,
Yeah. Well, then it's all. It's just people trying to get back to a way to communicate with the unseen world the way their ancestors did.
right,
It's just as much of a spiritual thing as a political thing.
right,
So, but yeah, I don't have enough to. I just kind of go with my feeling on that one. I think
Right.
that's what those kids were doing.
right,
Back they were just like, this is, and I think they were trying to sell records.
right. Yeah.
That's pretty practical.
But, well, cool. Do you, again, anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it.
Anything else you want to add?
Touched all the.
No, I'm good.
All right.
That was fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's also very hot in here.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
I was gonna warn you guys about that.
Stop this a bit.
yeah, you don't want to just record everything.
Yeah.